Have you ever wondered how our ancestors dealt with illness and injury without the modern medicine we have today? History is a fascinating tapestry, filled with medical practices that might seem peculiar to us. However, these procedures emerged from necessity, reflecting the understanding of health and disease at the time. One such practice was trepanation, where a hole was drilled into the skull to alleviate various ailments. Despite the risks and pain, it demonstrates the lengths people were willing to go to for relief. Another notable practice was bloodletting, often carried out through leeches or by cutting veins, intended to balance the body's humors. Moving forward, we encounter lobotomy and mercury therapy from the early 20th century. Lobotomy involves severing brain connections to treat mental illness. Mercury, despite its toxicity, was used to treat certain conditions. We'll also briefly mention electric shock therapy and the ill-famed Radithor, a radioactive drink. These medical practices might seem crude now, but they're a part of our shared human journey. So buckle up as we embark on this fascinating journey through time, exploring the evolution of medical practices. Imagine dealing with a headache by drilling a hole into your skull. That was the reality with trepanation. Trepanation is an ancient practice, steeped in mysticism and early medical theory. It involved drilling or scraping a hole into the skull, often resulting in severe consequences. Despite its crude nature, it was an attempt to address neurological issues by releasing evil spirits trapped in the brain, considered the source of discomfort. This procedure, despite the risks and resulting pain, was testament to human endurance. Infections and even death were not uncommon, yet the practice persisted for centuries. The concept may seem barbaric to us today, but it speaks to early attempts at understanding the brain. Despite its dangers, trepanation was an early attempt to address neurological issues. From drilling holes to intentionally withdrawing blood, medical practices sure were extreme. Welcome to the era of bloodletting. In the past, physicians followed an ancient belief that four substances, humors, filled the human body. These were blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. A balance of these humors equaled health. An imbalance led to disease. Physicians tried to restore balance through bloodletting. This involved incisions in veins or using leeches to draw out excess blood. Far from curing ailments, this practice often weakened patients and led to further complications. Yet, it reveals early human attempts to understand the body's internal workings. Bloodletting, while harmful, reflects early attempts to understand and balance the body's internal workings. As we move into the 20th century, we encounter two curiously dangerous practices: lobotomy and mercury therapy. The lobotomy, developed in the early 1900s, involved severing connections in the patient's prefrontal cortex. Intended to alleviate severe mental illnesses, it was celebrated as a breakthrough. However, the consequences were devastating. Patients often experienced severe cognitive impairments, their personalities drastically altered. In extreme cases, it left them permanently disabled. This procedure is a stark example of how good intentions can lead to disastrous outcomes when paired with insufficient understanding. Concurrently, mercury therapy was also prevalent. This heavy metal was employed to combat various illnesses, particularly syphilis. The belief was that mercury would exterminate the bacteria causing the disease. However, the reality was quite different. Mercury, being highly toxic, led to severe health issues. patients experienced tremors, mood swings, memory problems, and more, as the mercury wreaked havoc on their bodies. Despite the immediate detrimental effects, mercury therapy was used until penicillin was discovered mid-century. These practices, lobotomy and mercury therapy, underscore the perils of medical experimentation without adequate comprehension of human physiology and treatment substances. From brain surgery to toxic treatments, medical history is indeed filled with shocking practices. Speaking of shocking, let's delve into the era of electric shock therapy and radioactive health tonics. In the early 20th century, medical knowledge broadened, leading to experimental treatments. One such was electric shock therapy, known as electroconvulsive therapy, or ECT. It induced seizures in patients using high-voltage electric shocks, treating severe depression and schizophrenia. Despite its occasional effectiveness, the method caused memory loss, confusion, and sometimes physical harm, making it a subject of controversy. Today, its safer version is used, but the memory of its dangerous past lingers. Concurrently, radium's discovery led to its usage as a health tonic. Radithor, marketed as a rejuvenating drink, was a radium-rich radioactive antidote. Advertised as a cure-all potion, it promised energy and vitality. However, it caused severe radiation poisoning, leading to tissue damage, bone decay, and sometimes death. The infamous Eben Byers, a wealthy industrialist, consumed large quantities of Radithor, leading to his eventual public demise. Despite horrific outcomes, Radithor was sold for a decade before it was banned. Its tragic tale reminds us of the dangers of unregulated medical practices and the importance of rigorous scientific testing. Even as science advanced, misguided practices continued to cause harm. The lessons from the era of electric shock therapy and radioactive health tonics serve as a cautionary tale. As we progress in our comprehension of health and medicine, let's ensure that we leave these dangerous practices firmly in the past. Our final stop in this journey through historical medical practices brings us to a dark chapter: forced sterilization. This grim part of medical history saw medical procedures weaponized to target the defenseless. Throughout the last century, eugenics programs were implemented by countries worldwide, including the US, forcibly sterilizing those labeled unfit. The aim was supposedly to enhance human genetics, but the methods were both flawed and ethically wrong. Victims, often people with disabilities, the poor, and ethnic minorities, were chosen not for any illness, but being deemed imperfect. These disturbing practices infringed on reproductive rights, causing deep psychological scars. In cases, victims were unaware, as consent was seldom sought, and procedures were often masked as other treatments. This wasn't just a personal tragedy, but it held broader societal implications, used to control marginalized populations, thereby reinforcing discrimination and poverty cycles. In this grim medical history chapter, remembering the survivor's resilience is vital. Forced sterilization serves as a stark reminder of the harm that can be done when medical practices are used for discriminatory purposes. From trepanation to forced sterilization, we've seen a wide range of medical practices throughout history. Our early journey started with trepanation, an ancient method aiming to cure ailments by drilling holes into the skull. Then we moved to practices like bloodletting, part of a then common belief in balancing bodily humors. The era of lobotomies and mercury therapy followed, both having their set of drawbacks. We also examined electroconvulsive therapy, still in today, and Radithor, a radioactive health tonic with harmful side effects. Lastly, we touched on forced sterilization, a stark reminder of the need for ethics in medicine. As we continue to advance in medicine, may we always remember the lessons of our past, striving for practices that are both ethical and effective.